Your heart is hammering so hard you think it might burst right out of your chest. Your palms are getting clammy. There's a ringing in your ears, and those numbers staring back at you from the blood pressure monitor. They just can't be right. 180 over 100. Yet just half an hour ago, back home, you had a perfectly normal 120 over 80. Does that sound familiar? If it does, then you have likely encountered one of the most frustrating and surprisingly common medical phenomena, white coat syndrome. Today, we aren't just going to talk about it. We are going to dissect it. We will pull apart your fears, understand the invisible strings your brain pulls to make your body react this way, and most importantly, I'm going to give you a step-by-step plan for how to take back control. You'll learn that this isn't just nerves. It's a complex psychophysiological process. By staying with us until the end of this video, you will gain an arsenal of proven techniques that will help you walk into the doctor's office with a calm heart and genuinely accurate blood pressure readings. What figures do you typically see on the monitor when you're at the surgery? Let us know in the comments below. Let's see how many of us are fighting this invisible battle. So, first, let's get our terminology straight. White coat syndrome, or white coat hypertension, as the professionals call it, is a condition where a person's blood pressure rises solely within a medical setting, such as at a GP, surgery, or in a clinic. Crucially, when you are in your familiar home environment, your pressure remains well within the normal range. This phenomenon was first described in detail in 1983, although doctors had certainly noticed it long before that. It is vital to understand the key difference. This is not the same as stable chronic hypertension. With true hypertension, your pressure is consistently elevated, regardless of whether you're at home, at work, or at the hospital. White coat syndrome is fundamentally a stress reaction. Your body views the doctor's visit as a perceived threat and immediately triggers that ancient fight or flight mechanism. The problem is that for a long time, this phenomenon wasn't taken seriously, often being dismissed out of hand as simply the patient being overly emotional. However, current research clearly indicates that people suffering from white coat syndrome are actually at a higher risk of developing genuine chronic hypertension down the line. Therefore, brushing it off and saying, "Oh, I was just a little nervous," is a major mistake. This is a real condition that requires proper attention and a clear strategy, both from the patient and their clinician. The first reason echoes from the past. Let's take a little trip back in time, all the way to your childhood. Try and recall those very first visits to the doctor. What memories bubble up? Chances are they aren't exactly fond ones. That distinct, unforgettable smell of the hospital corridor, a peculiar mix of disinfectant, medicines, and something else, something subtly worrying, the cold shock of the stethoscope on your skin, giving you goosebumps, and of course, the injections, the sharp, sudden pain that you simply couldn't control. For a young child whose world relies on predictability and safety, the doctor's surgery was a place where all the rules seemed to be broken. A strange adult in a white coat doing confusing and sometimes painful things to your body, while your parents, who usually protected you fiercely, just stood by telling you, "You just have to be brave and bear it." This is where a powerful neural pathway gets established in a child's mind. White coat equals pain, fear, and helplessness. This early experience, even if it has been forgotten at a conscious level, continues to reside deep in our subconscious, within the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotions, and specifically for fear. Every subsequent visit to the doctor, even the most routine one, triggers this old program. Your body reacts to these sensory cues, the smell, the sight of the instruments, the white coat itself, and starts a cascade of stress responses long before you even realise that you're actually perfectly safe. This isn't your fault, nor is it a sign of weakness. It is a completely normal, learned reaction of the nervous system, rooted in that early negative experience. Think of it like a computer on which a program was installed years ago, and now it automatically launches whenever you click a certain icon. Your goal isn't to delete that program, which is nearly impossible, but to learn to spot when it's running and consciously switch to a different, more helpful one. Understanding that the root of this issue lies deep in the past is the first and most crucial step towards healing. You stop blaming yourself for being nervous and start tackling the true cause, the ingrained childhood fear and that profound feeling of losing control. The second major reason is quite simple. It's the sheer terror of the unknown, the fear of bad news. For most adults, a trip to the doctor is rarely a casual affair. It's almost always a step into the great unknown. We aren't there because we feel wonderful. We go because something is bothering us, pain, discomfort, or some worrying symptom. And this is when our minds involuntarily start spinning a dreadful carousel of the gloomiest scenarios. Our brains are hardwired to try and predict the future, to prepare for potential threats. And when faced with uncertainty, they invariably jump to the worst-case conclusion. We start asking, what if this cough isn't just a simple cold? What if these headaches are a symptom of something truly serious? What if the tests come back with terrible news? This internal dialogue, what psychologists call catastrophizing, is a massive engine of stress. You haven't even stepped into the consulting room yet, but your body is already reacting to this imaginary threat as if it were entirely real. Stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, begin flooding your system. Your heart rate speeds up, your blood vessels constrict. These are the direct physical precursors to that sudden spike in blood pressure. The doctor, in this scenario, becomes the messenger, the judge who is about to deliver a verdict on your health. We dread hearing anything that could change our life for the worse, require difficult treatment, impose strict limitations, or, in the very worst case, be a final judgment. This deep-seated existential fear of illness and mortality is perhaps the strongest fear we have. And as you sit down across from the doctor, you are subconsciously bracing yourself for the worst possible outcome. Your body shifts straight into high alert, full fight or flight mode. It simply cannot tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. To your physiology, the anxious thought about a potential diagnosis is just as real as being chased by a predator. This is why, when the nurse wraps the cuff around your arm, your system is already at the peak of this stress reaction. That reading isn't reflecting your true normal state. It's purely measuring your fear of the unknown. Understanding this mechanism allows us to shift focus. The problem isn't the act of measuring the pressure itself, but the worrying thoughts that precede it, and it is those thoughts we absolutely must learn how to manage. The third reason, a profound loss of control and the feeling of complete vulnerability. The doctor's surgery or medical office is a rather unique environment where our usual social roles and rules simply vanish. In everyday life, you might be a professional, a parent, a friend, someone firmly in control, yet the moment you cross that threshold, you willingly hand over a significant portion of that control to a complete stranger. You are asked to undress in front of them, answer deeply personal questions, and allow various procedures or manipulations to be performed on your body. This instantly forces you into a passive, dependent, and vulnerable position. You are no longer the one running the show. This feeling of lost control is, in itself, a powerful stressor. The human mind naturally craves autonomy and predictability, and when those foundations are removed, anxiety immediately rushes in. The physician, conversely, is positioned firmly in a role of power and authority. They possess knowledge you do not. They often use complex medical terminology, and they make decisions that directly impact your future well-being. This imbalance of power can easily trigger subconscious tension, and sometimes even a subtle sense of humiliation. You might feel like you're sitting an important exam you desperately want to pass. Your body is being assessed and checked against certain medical standards. The deep-seated fear of failing to comply, of being labelled a difficult patient, or receiving a poor grade in the form of a diagnosis, layers on yet more anxiety. Furthermore, the physical act of a medical examination is fundamentally an invasion of your personal space. Those necessary professional touches, however vital, can still create profound discomfort. You are often lying on a couch while the doctor stands above you. Even this simple spatial dynamic dramatically underlines your vulnerability. Your body, which is normally your fortress, here becomes merely an object of study. This objectification, this transformation from a thinking subject into a passive object, can feel deeply unsettling. In response to this powerful feeling of exposure and lost control, your nervous system automatically flicks on its defense mechanism. You instinctively tense up, ready to protect yourself from this perceived intrusion. Your muscles clench, your breathing becomes shallow, and your blood pressure, quite naturally, begins to rise. This is simply your body's instinctive attempt to reclaim some degree of control and to defend its boundaries when it feels entirely defenseless. The fourth reason? Sensory overload and that typical hospital atmosphere. Let's really examine the environment of a medical facility itself. It is fundamentally different from everything we're used to in everyday life. And this environment constantly assaults our senses, sending immediate alarm signals straight to the brain. Let's start with sight. The bright, often cold, fluorescent lighting, so characteristic of clinics and hospitals, can cause tension and headaches all by itself. White or washed-out green walls, the sterile sheen of metal, the sight of medical instruments, syringes, or those little sample jars, these are all visual triggers associated with illness and discomfort. Our brain processes these signals and concludes, this is not a safe space. Now hearing, it's rarely quiet in a clinic. The hum of equipment, footsteps in the corridor, muffled conversations outside the door, children crying, those tannoy announcements, this constant soundscape creates a feeling of rush and anxiety. The lack of silence simply prevents our nervous system from truly relaxing. The most powerful trigger of all is smell. As we've mentioned before, the classic hospital smell is an incredibly strong anchor that instantly pulls us into a state of anxiety. The odour of antiseptics, alcohol, and medicines is strongly linked in our memory to negative experiences. Even if you don't consciously notice it, your brain registers these smells and activates your ancient fear centres. Finally, touch. The hard plastic seats in the waiting room, the cold covering on the examination couch, the touch of a chilly instrument. All of this intensifies the feeling of discomfort and detachment. All this sensory information floods the brain simultaneously, creating what we call sensory overload. Our nervous system is forced to process a huge volume of unfamiliar and potentially threatening signals. The result? It shifts immediately into high alert mode. Imagine you are alone in an unfamiliar wood at night. Every rustle, every shadow makes you jump. The exact same thing happens to your nervous system in a hospital setting. It operates in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. It's simply impossible to relax when you're in this state. And when you add direct contact with the doctor and the process of having your blood pressure taken to this sensory overload, a spike in those readings becomes virtually unavoidable. Your body is simply reacting to an environment it perceives as hostile. The fifth reason, the fear of being judged and feeling socially inadequate. Now, this might seem a bit subtle, but seeing the doctor carries a powerful social dimension, you see. We aren't just afraid of the diagnosis, we're afraid of the assessment from the medical professional. For many of us, the doctor isn't just a specialist. They are a serious figure of authority whose opinion carries immense weight, and subconsciously we dread looking inadequate or wrong in their eyes. For example, we might fear being judged for our lifestyle choices. If you've got a bit of extra weight, if you smoke, or if you're a bit lax with your exercise regime, you fully expect the doctor to tell you off like a naughty schoolchild. That fear of being caught out over unhealthy habits brings on shame and tension. You end up either bracing yourself defensively or just feeling thoroughly guilt-ridden, which naturally doesn't help you relax one bit. Then there's the fear of looking foolish or being branded a hypochondriac. You might worry that your symptoms aren't serious enough, that you're simply wasting a busy specialist's valuable time by making a fuss. Perhaps you struggle to articulate exactly how you feel, and you worry that you won't be understood, or worse, they'll think you're just making it all up. This lack of self-confidence and the dread of being misunderstood create a significant barrier to communication and only ramp up the anxiety. A separate issue entirely is the sheer embarrassment linked to having to discuss intimate health details or undergoing what we perceive as slightly undignified procedures. We might feel incredibly awkward talking about issues with our digestion or our sexual health, and the thought of having to undress makes us deeply uncomfortable. That shame and awkwardness cause us to tense up and effectively shut down. The result is that instead of being an open and cooperative patient during the health dialogue, we arrive at the surgery completely consumed by social anxiety. We worry intensely about the impression we make, what they'll think of us, and how we will be assessed. This obsession with social approval is yet another powerful catalyst for a stress reaction. Your body reacts to the fear of judgment just as it would to any other threat, by raising your blood pressure. It's proof positive of how tightly interwoven our emotions, our social anxieties, and our physical reactions truly are. Let's delve a bit deeper into the biology of fear. What exactly happens inside your body when you just catch sight of that white coat? A complex chain of events, known universally as the fight or flight response, kicks into action. This is an ancient survival mechanism, passed down from our ancestors who needed it to escape predators. And the conductor of this entire stress orchestra is, of course, your brain. It all begins in a tiny spot in the brain called the amygdala. This small area, roughly the size and shape of an almond, is essentially your body's alarm bell. When you encounter a situation your brain deems threatening, like stepping into a clinic waiting room, the amygdala instantly fires off an urgent signal to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the command center. Once it gets that signal, it immediately switches on two crucial systems. The first is the sympathetic nervous system. Think of this as the accelerator pedal for your whole system. Through nerve fibers, it signals the adrenal glands, which instantly flood your bloodstream with adrenaline. And this is where the action really starts. Adrenaline makes your heart pound faster and harder, pumping extra blood to your muscles, just in case you need to run away or stand your ground. Your bronchial tubes expand so you can gulp down more oxygen. Your pupils dilate to get a better view of the potential threat. But crucially for our topic, adrenaline forces the blood vessels in certain parts of your body to narrow drastically. We call this vasoconstriction. When these vessels constrict, the passage becomes much smaller, forcing the heart to work overtime to push the blood through. Imagine you're watering your garden with a hose, and suddenly someone steps right on it. The water pressure inside that hose immediately shoots up. The exact same thing happens to your blood pressure. It jumps dramatically, and all this happens in a fraction of a second, completely automatically. You don't even have time to think, "Oh, I'm scared," before your body is already on full, physical high alert. Now, this mechanism was perfect for surviving in the wilderness, but in our modern world it often misfires in situations where there is no genuine physical danger, such as simply going to see the doctor. But this whole process isn't just about adrenaline, mind you. Simultaneously, alongside the activation of your sympathetic nervous system, the hypothalamus kicks off a second system. It's slower, certainly, but just as powerful. This is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis for short. If that initial adrenaline rush is a sprinter, the HPA axis is definitely the stress marathon runner. So, the hypothalamus releases CRH, corticotropin-releasing hormone. This signal travels to the pituitary gland, that tiny gland at the base of your brain, telling it to release another hormone called ACTH. ACTH then circulates through the bloodstream, reaching your adrenal glands and ordering them to pump out cortisol, the so-called master stress hormone. Unlike adrenaline, which is quick and fleeting, cortisol stays in your system much longer, keeping your body on high alert. What exactly does it do? Well, cortisol boosts your blood sugar levels. ensuring your brain and muscles have plenty of quick energy. It suppresses systems that aren't critical during a fight or flight situation, things like your digestion, your reproductive system, and your immune system. Crucially for us, however, cortisol makes your blood vessels much more sensitive to adrenaline. It essentially adds fuel to the fire, strengthening and prolonging the vessel constriction caused by adrenaline. This means your blood pressure stays elevated throughout the entire stressful event. If your doctor's appointment lasts 20 or 30 minutes, your body is being continuously bathed in this potent hormonal cocktail the entire time. Now here's the rub. Chronic activation of this HPA axis, due to constant stress or specific phobias, like fear of the doctor, genuinely exhausts the body. Permanently high cortisol levels can lead to a host of health issues, including weakened immunity, digestive trouble, sleep disturbances, and, somewhat ironically, over time it can actually contribute to real long-term hypertension, not just the situational type. So, what starts as a purely psychological reaction is transformed by these hormonal mechanisms into a real physiological storm, which doesn't just skew the blood pressure reading, but also harms your body in the long run. Let's turn our attention to the heart now. When we feel frightened or anxious, we often say our heart is pounding out of our chest, or perhaps that our heart skipped a beat. And these aren't just colourful metaphors, you know. The heart is actually one of the very first organs to react to stress. As we established earlier, under the influence of adrenaline, it immediately starts to beat faster. We call this tachycardia. This increased heart rate is vital because it ensures that oxygen-rich blood is delivered more quickly to your muscles. But it's not just about the pace, it's also about the power. Adrenaline forces the heart muscle itself, the myocardium, to contract much harder. Every single heartbeat becomes more powerful. The combination of increased speed and increased strength means that per minute the heart pumps a much greater volume of blood into your arteries. This specific measurement is known as cardiac output. Now let's put two and two together. We have this increased cardiac output, the heart is working like a powerful pump, and we have constricted peripheral vessels. These are the pipes carrying the blood which have become narrower. What happens to the pressure within that system? Exactly. It's inevitably going to rise. Blood pressure is essentially the force with which your blood pushes against the walls of your arteries. When the heart pushes harder and pumps more blood into those narrow vessels, that force significantly increases. This is precisely what the blood pressure cuff records. The top number, the systolic pressure, reflects the pressure during the heart's contraction, or systole. And this number is especially sensitive to stress because it depends directly on the force of that cardiac output. The bottom number, the diastolic pressure, shows the pressure when the heart is relaxed, which is known as diastole. That one is more dependent on the tone and stiffness of your blood vessels. In cases of white coat syndrome, we often see a significant spike in that systolic pressure specifically. Furthermore, the heart's rhythm itself changes under stress. It can become irregular. This phenomenon is known as arrhythmia. While stress-induced arrhythmias are usually harmless and resolve on their own, they can cause very unsettling sensations, like the heart-skipping beats, fluttering, or strong thumps in the chest. This, in turn, often ramps up the panic and anxiety even further, creating a truly vicious circle. We mustn't overlook the crucial role breathing plays in this whole stress drama. Breathing is quite unique, really. On the one hand, it's completely automatic. We don't consciously think about how to breathe. Yet, on the other hand, we can take deliberate control over it. When fear hits, our automatic breathing changes drastically. It becomes rapid, shallow, and mostly restricted to the chest. This is what we call hyperventilation. Why does the body do this? In a classic fight or flight scenario, the body is trying to flood the muscles with as much oxygen as possible. But this mechanism has a significant side effect. When we breathe so frequently and shallowly, we end up expelling too much carbon dioxide. The level of CO2 in the blood drops, which throws off its acid-alkaline balance. Medically, this state is known as respiratory alkalosis. And this causes a whole host of uncomfortable symptoms that only fuel the panic, dizziness, the feeling of not getting enough air, even though, ironically, you are breathing too much, tingling in the hands and feet, blurred vision, and a general sense of unreality. You might genuinely feel like you're suffocating or having a heart attack, which naturally cranks the panic up even higher. But how exactly does all this link to blood pressure? The connection isn't as direct as it is with adrenaline, but it certainly exists. Firstly, the panic itself, combined with the unpleasant physical feelings from hyperventilation, creates extra stress. This keeps adrenaline and cortisol levels high. Secondly, that sudden change in the blood's gas composition can affect the tone of tiny blood vessels, particularly in the brain, causing them to spasm. But the most crucial point is this: proper, slow, deep breathing is the key to activating the parasympathetic nervous system. This is essentially our body's brake pedal, the system responsible for rest, relaxation, and recovery. When we deliberately slow our breathing down, making it diaphragmatic, breathing deep into the belly, we send a signal to the brain saying, "All clear, no threat here." In response, the brain starts cutting back on stress hormones, the heart rate slows, blood vessels relax and widen, and your blood pressure starts to return to normal. That is precisely why controlled breathing exercises are one of the fastest and most effective ways to manage a panic attack and bring your blood pressure down, sometimes even while you are sitting right there in the doctor's office. Right then, let's finally talk about your muscles. You might be wondering, what exactly have tense muscles got to do with your blood pressure? Actually, the link is very direct. Think about how you stand or sit when you are scared or really nervous. You automatically tense up, almost hunching over, trying to make yourself smaller. Your shoulders creep up towards your ears. You pull your head in, clench your jaw, and tighten your neck back and tummy muscles. This is an ancient defensive reflex, you see. Your body is bracing itself for a potential blow, protecting those vital organs. This constant muscle tension, sometimes called a muscular armor by the experts, doesn't just disappear. It has consequences. Firstly, those tight muscles squeeze the blood vessels running right through them. That means your blood has to push harder against extra resistance. This forces your heart to work much harder, raising your blood pressure as a result. Think of it like a garden hose. If you pinch it, not just once, but dozens of times along its length. Secondly, if your muscles are always tense, they send a constant stream of danger, danger signals to the brain. The brain thinks, well, if the muscles are tense, the threat must still be around. So it keeps pumping out those stress hormones, preventing you from ever truly relaxing. It becomes a real vicious cycle. Your fear causes tension, and that tension maintains the fear. Plus, all that tightness in your neck and shoulders often triggers tension headaches. These are already common, but they tend to be worse when you're worried about seeing the doctor, making you feel generally awful. It's also worth noting that just waiting for your pressure to be checked makes us tense up. When that cuff starts squeezing your arm, the natural instinct is to resist it by tensing your arm muscles. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do, and it can significantly skew your results, raising them by 10 or even 20 points. For an accurate reading, your pressure must be taken when you are completely relaxed with a completely floppy arm. Consciously relaxing those muscles is another powerful tool against that white coat syndrome. Techniques like progressive muscle relaxation, where you deliberately tense and then release different muscle groups, help break that vicious cycle of fear and tension. They send the very same signal to your brain as slow breathing does. No threat here! Everything's fine! You can relax now. We've covered the causes and mechanics. Now let's move on to perhaps the most troublesome and tricky part of this whole white coat syndrome, what we call the vicious cycle of anxiety. It's a self-perpetuating system that over time only makes the underlying problem worse. How exactly does this cycle start? It all begins with that first negative experience. Let's say you went for a routine appointment. You were already a bit flustered, and the doctor recorded a high blood pressure reading, say 160 over 100. The doctor might have frowned slightly, perhaps asked a few extra questions, and suggested you start keeping a pressure diary. This plants a very firm seed in your mind. I have a blood pressure issue. This trip to the doctor has just confirmed that there is something wrong with me. Now, leading up to your next visit, you carry a very specific fear, backed up by that previous experience. You're not just generally afraid of doctors, you're specifically terrified of one event, repeating that high blood pressure reading. This is what we call anticipatory anxiety. Days or perhaps even weeks before your appointment, you start dwelling on it. What if my pressure is high again? The doctor will decide I'm truly hypertensive and put me on medication for life. These worries just keep turning the wheel of anxiety faster and faster. By the time you walk into the surgery, you are already completely on edge. Naturally, your blood pressure reading turns out high again, perhaps even higher than the last time. And this, crucially, serves as further proof that your deepest fears were completely justified. The cycle is now complete. Every subsequent visit becomes progressively more stressful. You go to the doctor already expecting a bad result, and that very expectation, in essence, creates the bad result. Psychologists famously call this the self-fulfilling prophecy. You are so certain the pressure will be high that your body obediently follows that command, triggering all those physical stress responses we discussed earlier. Over time, this fear can actually generalize. You start to dread not just the blood pressure check at the doctor's office, but even taking a reading at home. The mere sight of the blood pressure monitor can trigger genuine panic. You might even start avoiding the doctor altogether, even when you genuinely need medical help, just to avoid confronting that unpleasant experience. This is a very dangerous path, and it can sadly mean that a serious underlying condition is diagnosed far too late. Let's take a closer look at this catastrophizing idea that we mentioned earlier. Essentially, it's a slip-up in our thinking, what they call a cognitive distortion, and it plays an absolutely key role in keeping that awful, vicious cycle of worry going. Catastrophizing is simply our mind's habit of taking one little negative thought or event and spinning it into the absolute worst-case scenario imaginable. So how does this actually show up with white coat syndrome? Imagine the nurse starts taking your blood pressure. You hear the machine buzzing and you feel that cuff squeezing your arm. And bam! That first thought pops into your head. The numbers are going to be high. That's the initial spark. But our brain doesn't stop there, does it? It instantly builds this horrifying chain reaction. Something like this. High numbers mean the doctor will say, I have high blood pressure. I'll get prescribed a load of pills with nasty side effects. I'll be dependent on medication for the rest of my life, unable to work properly. The pills will stop working. I'll have a heart attack or a stroke. I'll end up disabled. Or worse, I'll die. Do you see that? From one simple fact, a potentially high reading on the machine, our mind jumps, in a fraction of a second, to the worst possible ending. Your brain completely ignores the realistic alternative options, things like, maybe it's just high because I'm nervous and the doctor will understand that. Even if this is the start of high blood pressure, modern medicine can control it effectively. I can make lifestyle changes and feel better. No, your mind fixates only on the catastrophic scenario, and your body? It reacts not to reality, but to this imagined horror. It prepares for a heart attack. It prepares for death, dumping a massive dose of stress hormones into your system. Naturally, your blood pressure shoots right up, confirming that initial fear and cementing the belief that the disaster is real. The only way to break this vicious cycle is by learning how to catch those automatic catastrophic thoughts and challenge them directly. You need to become your own common sense advocate. Ask yourself questions like, what's the actual proof this specific disaster is going to happen? What are the other, less frightening explanations for this feeling? And what is the very worst that could happen in reality? And could I cope with that? This technique, which is at the heart of cognitive behavioral therapy, gives you back control over your thoughts and, crucially, over your body's reaction. Another crucial psychological mechanism that locks us into this vicious cycle is what we call confirmation bias. Simply put, this is our natural tendency. It's actually hardwired into us to seek out, interpret, and remember information that already confirms what we believe. At the same time, we tend to simply ignore, or perhaps downplay, any facts or figures that contradict those existing beliefs. So how does this manifest when we're talking about blood pressure? You develop the firm belief, my blood pressure is always high when I'm at the surgery. Now your brain starts acting like a highly selective filter, passing through only the facts that support this. You go for your appointment and the reading is, say, 170/95. Your brain instantly ticks the box. There you are. I knew it. You leave the consulting room, sit down in the corridor, perhaps calm down a little, and your pressure drops nicely to 130/80. What happens? Your mind will likely ignore or dismiss this entirely. Oh, that was just a fluke. Deep down, I know things are bad. Let's say you measure your pressure at home, and for a whole week, it stays at a perfect 120/80. Surely that's proof you don't have constant hypertension. But confirmation bias kicks in, forcing you to interpret this differently. Perhaps my home monitor is faulty, or this is just the calm before the storm. I know it'll be high again at the doctor's. In essence, you trust that single high reading, taken under stress, far more than you trust dozens of normal readings taken when you are relaxed. This mechanism is incredibly insidious because it creates a powerful illusion of objectivity. You genuinely feel you are just looking at the facts, but in reality you are only allowing yourself to see the facts that support your existing worldview, even if that worldview is overwhelmingly negative. To break free of this trap, we must consciously make an effort to seek out the evidence that disproves our assumption. You must actively focus on those normal pressure readings. Write them down, read them back to yourself. Ask yourself, I've had 20 perfectly normal readings and only 2 high ones at the surgery. Which set of data is truly more reliable? You need to deliberately accumulate proof of your health to outweigh that solitary piece of evidence for illness, which only occurs under stress. This takes patience and practice, but gradually it allows you to loosen and then shatter that harmful belief that fuels your anxiety. Over time, that vicious circle of anxiety can eventually lead to a state that psychologists term learned helplessness. Although this phenomenon was first discovered in animal experiments, it applies equally and fully to human beings. Learned helplessness happens when a person is repeatedly faced with an unpleasant situation they cannot control. Eventually, they conclude that they are utterly powerless to change it. They stop even attempting to fix things, even when a clear opportunity presents itself. In the context of white coat syndrome, here's how this plays out. You go to the GP time and again your blood pressure is high. You've tried to pull yourself together or just not worry, but nothing works. After a few failed attempts, you start believing that your body's reaction is completely beyond your control. You essentially throw in the towel and resign yourself to your fate. The conviction settles in. I can't do anything about this. My own body is letting me down. This state is highly dangerous. Firstly, it strips away your motivation to seek solutions. Why bother with breathing exercises or psychological techniques if you're already convinced they won't work? Learned helplessness utterly paralyzes your willpower and forces you to passively accept the discomfort. Secondly, it often leads to depressive states. That feeling of powerlessness, of having lost control over your body and your life, is a direct route to apathy, low mood, and a general loss of interest. You start seeing yourself purely as the patient or the hypertensive, and that label becomes a key part of your identity. Thirdly, as we mentioned, learned helplessness leads to avoidance behavior. The easiest way to deal with an unpleasant, uncontrollable situation is simply to avoid it altogether. You stop going to the doctor, postpone routine checkups, and ignore clear symptoms. The consequences of this can be catastrophic. Overcoming learned helplessness starts small. You need to regain a sense of control, even if it's over just one thing. For instance, start regularly checking your blood pressure at home and see that in a relaxed setting, you can achieve normal readings. This is a small but vital victory, proving you are not entirely powerless. Then you can start taking tiny steps to manage the anxiety itself. Don't set a goal of walking into the doctor's office next time and getting an ideal reading. Instead, aim simply to complete a breathing exercise while you're waiting in the queue. Every one of these small, successful actions will gradually break down that wall of learned helplessness and restore faith in your own abilities. Let's turn now to the social side of this self-perpetuating cycle. Our anxiety isn't just driven by internal processes, it's greatly magnified by the reactions of others, particularly the doctors themselves. Regrettably, not all medical professionals have the deep psychological understanding or the time to thoroughly explore the subtleties of each patient's state. Picture the scene. Your doctor checks your blood pressure and finds it elevated. Their primary professional response is naturally to treat it with caution. They might start firing off concerning questions. How long has this been an issue? Do you have a family history of heart attacks? They'll likely order additional tests. An ECG, maybe an ultrasound scan of the heart. Medically, these are the right steps. But for an anxious patient, this is terrifying. It confirms their deepest fears. They think, if the doctor is this worried, the situation must be truly dire. The doctor's professional concern instantly magnifies your own anxiety. Consider the alternative scenario. The doctor witnesses your distress and tries to be reassuring, perhaps saying, "Don't get so worked up. You're only pushing your own pressure up." Even if they mean well, this phrase often feels like a dismissal of your genuine worries. You end up feeling completely misunderstood, maybe even ashamed of your perceived lack of composure, which only heightens the tension. Now you start fearing not just the raised blood pressure, but the doctor's negative judgment. You become afraid of being seen as over-dramatic or a time-wasting patient, sometimes based on just one or two readings taken while the patient is stressed. They are prematurely diagnosed with hypertension and prescribed lifelong medication. If they start taking these tablets when they don't truly need them, because their pressure is fine in everyday life, they can face side effects such as hypotension or dangerously low blood pressure. This just adds confusion and seriously erodes their trust in medical care. To finally break free from this social cycle, open and honest communication with your doctor is absolutely vital. You shouldn't be embarrassed, just tell them plainly, "Doctor, I get incredibly anxious when I visit you, and my blood pressure always spikes. At home, it's absolutely fine. Could this be white coat syndrome? What's the best way forward?" A good, empathetic clinician will take this seriously. They might suggest taking your pressure again at the end of the appointment, recommend reliable home monitoring, and interpret the readings with your specific anxiety in mind. Right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the practical steps. How do we actually break this vicious cycle of anxiety? The preparation needs to start well before you ever step through the doctor's door. Good, sensible preparation is truly half the battle. The very first step in this preparation is choosing the right doctor and clinic. If you have the luxury of choice, please don't just settle for the first specialist you come across. Look up reviews, ask your friends or neighbours. You don't just need a competent diagnostician. You need a doctor known for a patient, calm and empathetic approach, a practitioner who is willing to listen and dedicate sufficient time to their patients. If you know your usual NHS GP is sharp, always rushed, and limits appointments to 5 minutes, it might be worth finding an alternative specialist, perhaps in a private clinic. Your peace of mind is absolutely worth that expense. The atmosphere of the clinic matters tremendously too. If it's a noisy, overcrowded public surgery with long waiting times and exhausted staff, your stress levels will skyrocket before you even get near the reception desk. Whenever possible, opt for smaller, more intimate medical centres, places without all the rush and chaos, where you can book a precise appointment time and wait calmly in a comfortable environment. Pay close attention to how the reception staff speak to you. Courteous and pleasant personnel are an excellent indicator. If, even at the point of booking, you are being snapped at or answered through gritted teeth, that is a powerful trigger that will immediately set a negative precedent. Essentially, you need to find your own safe haven in the world of medicine, a clinic where you feel secure and a doctor you can trust, not only as a specialist, but as a person. This will create the foundational comfort necessary to tackle your fears moving forward. Please don't be afraid to try out different doctors. You have every right to find someone you feel genuinely comfortable with. That first consultation is not just a diagnosis of your physical body, it's also a crucial test of psychological compatibility. The second crucial thing we need to talk about is timing your visit. And listen here, never, ever book a doctor's appointment straight after another commitment. If you're rushing straight from work, panicking on the tube or in traffic because you might be late, you'll walk into that room already pumped full of adrenaline. And frankly, no amount of deep breathing is going to bring you down quickly enough. Plan the visit so you have plenty of spare time. Ideally, take the whole day off, or at least a good half day. If that's simply not possible, choose a time when you are least busy. First thing in the morning before the day truly starts, or perhaps in the evening when all your major tasks are finished. Give yourself at least an hour for a peaceful routine beforehand. Don't leap out of bed and immediately rush out the door. Wake up early, do some gentle stretching, have a warm shower, and eat breakfast slowly. Avoid that feeling of being flustered. Your job is to leave the house feeling as relaxed and peaceful as possible. The journey to the clinic is part of the preparation too. If you can, take a gentle walk through the park. If you must drive or take the bus, leave incredibly early. This avoids the stress of sitting in traffic jams or being jostled by crowds. While travelling, listen to some calming music, an audiobook, or a podcast about an unrelated topic. This is not the time to rehearse the visit in your head or conjure up worst-case scenarios. Your absolute goal is maximum distraction. Aim to arrive at the clinic about 15 to 20 minutes before your scheduled time. Don't go too early, otherwise you'll be sitting around stewing in anxiety, and certainly not late because we don't want the stress of running in. Use those 15 minutes to simply settle in. Don't just sit there glued to your mobile phone reading terrible news. Instead, look around, take a few deep breaths, and have a glass of water. Remind yourself that you are here to look after yourself, not to take an exam or endure some sort of torture. Sensible time management is stress management. By eliminating the need to rush, you remove one of the most powerful triggers of anxiety. The third step in getting ready is setting up what we call a calm ritual and making sure you've got all your facts straight. Before you see the doctor, your anxiety often feeds off the unknown. The best way to tackle that uncertainty is to take control of the situation yourself. A day or two beforehand, find a quiet spot and jot down everything that's bothering you, either on paper or on your phone. Make sure your concerns are phrased as clearly as possible. Put together a list of questions you want to ask the doctor. For example, what might these symptoms actually mean? What test do I need? How serious is this? What are the treatment options available? And what can I personally do to improve how I feel? Having this list will really boost your confidence. You won't have to worry about stress making you forget something important. You'll walk into that appointment not as a passive patient hoping for the best, but as an active participant, a true partner with your doctor in managing your health. This completely shifts how you feel inside. Alongside your questions, prepare a brief summary of your medical history, any long-term conditions you have, the medications you take regularly, whether you've had any operations, and if you have any allergies. This saves valuable time during the consultation and shows the doctor that you take responsibility for your well-being. Now let's talk about that calm ritual. This is just a simple set of steps you perform right before leaving the house and once you get to the clinic. It can be anything at all that personally helps you relax. For instance, you might sip a cup of herbal tea. Chamomile or peppermint works wonderfully. You could do a 5-minute guided meditation using an app. Or perhaps listen to your favourite soothing piece of music. You might even use aromatherapy oils, a dab of lavender or orange oil on your wrist. The whole point of the ritual is to create an anchor for calmness. When you repeat these actions a few times, your brain starts to link them directly to relaxation. So, when you perform them before a stressful event, you're essentially giving your body a command. We are relaxing now. This is much more effective than simply telling yourself, don't worry. Instead of fighting the anxiety, you are gently shifting your state of mind through familiar and pleasant actions. Now, the fourth aspect of preparation, and one people often overlook, is your physical state. What you eat and drink before you see the doctor can directly affect your blood pressure reading. Your main enemy here is caffeine, coffee, strong tea, energy drinks, and cola. They're all central nervous system stimulants. They can raise your pressure and speed up your heart rate all by themselves, but combine that with the stress of a doctor's visit, and the effect can be doubled. So make sure you completely steer clear of caffeinated drinks for at least 2 or 3 hours before your appointment. Or better yet, just avoid them entirely on the day of your visit. Switch to plain water, a nice herbal tea, or perhaps some low-fat natural yogurt. You should also try to avoid salty foods. Salt or sodium holds fluid in your body, which increases the volume of blood circulating and can push your blood pressure up. So, the day before your visit, don't tuck into things like pickles, crisps, smoked fish, or fast food. Stick to light, healthy meals. A big, heavy lunch right before your appointment is also a bad move. A very full stomach pushes up against your diaphragm. This can make breathing feel a little tricky and cause discomfort, which just adds to your overall tension. Try to eat about an hour and a half to 2 hours beforehand. Foods rich in potassium and magnesium are ideal, as these minerals help relax your blood vessels and steady your heart rhythm. Think things like bananas, dried apricots, baked potatoes, avocado, spinach, and nuts. Another vital point is smoking. Nicotine causes a sharp constriction of the blood vessels and a noticeable jump in blood pressure, lasting for about 15 to 20 minutes. So, whatever you do not smoke just before they take your pressure. If you are a smoker, your last cigarette should be at least 30 or 40 minutes before you step into the consulting room. Finally, don't forget to pop to the loo before your appointment. A full bladder causes discomfort and can actually reflexively raise your blood pressure by 10 to 15 points. It's a purely physical factor, and it's one you can easily sort out. Sticking to these few simple rules will help establish a clean slate for the reading, ensuring that only your psycho-emotional state affects the result, and not external chemical or physical factors. Step 5 in your preparation is addressing your worries ahead of time. You shouldn't wait until the day of your appointment to start tackling that anxiety. Use a technique called visualization or mental rehearsal. A few days before your visit, find a time when you know you won't be interrupted. Settle into a comfy armchair, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. Now imagine the entire process of going to the doctor in minute detail, but keep it completely positive. Picture yourself waking up feeling calm and doing your special, calming ritual. Imagine that you confidently and unhurriedly arrive at the clinic. You walk into the building and it feels bright and welcoming. You approach the reception desk and they give you a polite smile. You sit down in the waiting area, but you feel no fear. You breathe easily and steadily, perhaps looking at the pictures on the wall. The door opens and a pleasant, smiling doctor invites you in. You walk in, greet them confidently, and take your seat. You calmly explain what's bothering you, asking the questions from the list you prepared. The doctor listens carefully and shows genuine understanding. Then comes the moment for the blood pressure check. Picture the nurse putting the cuff on your arm, and you continue to breathe deeply and evenly the whole time. You feel completely relaxed. Your heart rate is steady. You look at the monitor and see those lovely, normal numbers. You feel a wave of relief and pride in yourself. The doctor praises you and confirms that everything is absolutely fine. You leave the room feeling light and satisfied. Run through this positive script in your mind several times. The point of this exercise is to create a new, positive neural pathway in your brain connected to visiting the doctor. You are essentially pre-living a successful experience. When you face the real situation, your brain will recognize the positive script, making it easier to follow that path, rather than defaulting to the usual panic. Think of it as rehearsing for a performance. The better prepared you are, the more confident you feel on stage. It's also helpful to chat through your anxieties beforehand with someone you trust, a partner, friend, or counselor. Simply voicing what you fear will immediately lower your level of tension. Right then, let's talk about what happens the moment you actually step into the clinic room. That crucial moment of truth. You've arrived early, had a moment to settle in, and now they've called you through. What should you do? The first and most vital rule: don't rush the blood pressure check. Don't just sit down as soon as you walk in and immediately hold out your arm for measurement. Your body needs a little time to adjust to the new surroundings and calm down after walking through the corridor. Ask the doctor or nurse for 5 minutes. Say quite frankly, would you mind if I just sit here for a moment and catch my breath before we measure it? I always get quite anxious. Any good healthcare professional will understand completely. Those 5 minutes are absolutely crucial. Use that time wisely. Sit correctly. Keep your back straight, resting against the chair back. Keep your legs uncrossed with both feet flat on the floor. Place the arm they'll be using on the desk or table so that it's completely relaxed and resting roughly at heart level. Don't hold it in the air. While you are sitting, don't talk and don't look at your phone. Concentrate fully on your body and your breathing. Now start applying the technique you practiced at home. The simplest and most effective method is called box breathing. It's a technique even used by highly trained professionals to maintain calm in stressful situations. The technique is very straightforward. Inhale slowly and deeply through your nose for a count of 4, focusing on expanding your stomach, not your chest. Then hold your breath for a count of 4. Next, exhale slowly and smoothly through your mouth for a count of 4. And finally, hold the breath out for a count of 4. Repeat this cycle several times. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. This rhythmic, slow breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's brake pedal, sending a powerful signal of safety to your brain. You literally cannot panic and breathe slowly and deeply at the same time. The two states are incompatible. Just 2 or 3 minutes of this kind of breathing can significantly lower your heart rate and begin the process of normalizing your blood pressure. If simple deep breathing isn't quite enough and you feel panic starting to gather pace and your thoughts becoming muddied, try using what's known as a grounding technique. The whole point of this exercise is to shift your attention away from catastrophic worrying and bring you firmly back to the present moment, the reality of the here and now, by focusing on your senses. The most effective and well-known method is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. You can do this very subtly, perhaps even while just sitting in your chair, and no one around you will notice. Begin by slowly and deliberately finding and naming 5 things that you can see around you. Do this quietly in your mind. For example, I see the white table. I see the blue pen. I see the framed certificate on the wall. I see the houseplant on the windowsill. I see my watch on my wrist. As you look at each item, note its colour, its shape, and its texture. Next, listen carefully and identify 4 distinct sounds that you can hear. I can hear the computer humming. I can hear the clock ticking. I can hear voices outside the door. I can hear my own breathing. Don't judge these sounds. Simply register them as they are. Following this, focus on tactile sensations and find 3 things you can feel. I can feel the pressure of my feet on the floor. I can feel the fabric of my clothing against my skin. I can feel the smooth surface of the chair's armrest. After that, try to identify 2 distinct smells. I can smell the hint of disinfectant. I can smell my own perfume or cologne. This can often be the hardest part, but do try your best. And finally, identify just one taste. I can still taste the mint tea I had this morning. Completing this exercise gives your brain a little mental reboot. You are gently but deliberately pulling it out of that vicious cycle of anxious thoughts and forcing it to concentrate on specific, neutral information being received by your senses. This will very quickly reduce the intensity of the panic and allow you to regain a sense of control over your perception. You stop being a victim of your thoughts and you become an observer of reality once again. You can practice this technique anywhere, the moment you feel anxiety levels starting to escalate. Another handy trick you can use right there in the doctor's surgery is what we call guided distraction. Our brains, bless them, aren't terribly good at focusing fully on two things at once. If you're completely absorbed in the blood pressure cuff, listening to every beat of your heart, every little puff and whir of that machine, you're only ramping up your own anxiety. Your job is simply to consciously shift your attention onto something else, something neutral, or ideally, something nice. One excellent way is active listening and engaging in conversation. Don't just sit there silently while they take your blood pressure. Ask the doctor or nurse a completely unrelated question. Maybe inquire about their day. Give them a nice compliment about something in the room, a picture, or perhaps the nice colour of the curtains. Start telling a simple, neutral story about your own life. The key is to keep the chat light and well away from anything medical. When you're busy talking and listening, your brain is occupied processing that information, and it has fewer resources left over for panicking. Another fantastic option is using mental exercises. For example, start counting backward in your head from 100, subtracting 7 each time. 100, 93, 86. That really takes concentration and immediately pulls your mind away from those worrying thoughts. Or try reciting the lyrics to an old favourite song. Or maybe start listing every single classmate you can remember from your school days. Visual distraction works wonderfully too. Focus entirely on a picture or a piece of art in the room and start examining it in great detail. What colours are they using? What exactly is depicted? Try to spot the tiniest details. Alternatively, if you've prepared beforehand, open a photograph on your phone that makes you feel lovely, a holiday snap, a picture of your pet or the family, and concentrate on it, remembering those wonderful moments. The goal of all these methods is simply to stop your attention from getting stuck on the blood pressure process and all the fears that come with it. You're essentially creating a small, parallel reality, a little mental escape. For those few minutes the procedure lasts. This does take a bit of practice, but over time you'll easily learn to shift your focus, and the blood pressure measurement will stop being the most central and most worrying part of your entire appointment. The key thing that can absolutely transform the situation is how you communicate with your doctor. Please don't bottle up your anxieties. Your GP isn't a mind reader. They can't guess what's going on inside. If you sit there silently with a perfectly straight face while the monitor shows high blood pressure, the doctor will naturally conclude you have hypertension. Your job is to give them all the information needed to interpret those readings correctly. There is absolutely no need to feel embarrassed or worry about sounding silly. White coat syndrome is incredibly common, and any decent doctor is fully aware of it. Prepare a few key phrases beforehand. For instance, "Doctor, I wanted to let you know immediately. I suffer from white coat syndrome. I get terribly anxious in medical settings, and my pressure always shoots up. At home, I measure it regularly, and it's quite normal. Here is my blood pressure diary." Having that logbook of home readings is your ace in the hole. It provides the doctor with objective, reliable data to work with and shows you are taking your health seriously. You can also request a few small changes to help you feel calmer. For example, could we possibly take my blood pressure at the end of the appointment rather than at the start? That way, I'll have a chance to settle down and get used to being here. Or perhaps, would you mind taking the reading 3 times with a few minutes in between and using the average? This is actually a standard practice when white coat hypertension is suspected. Also, ask the doctor to talk you through what they are doing. For example, could you tell me exactly what you're about to do? The uncertainty makes me nervous. An open and honest conversation transforms you from a passive patient into an active partner. It reduces that power imbalance and helps build a relationship based on trust. When you feel your doctor is listening, understanding, and willing to meet you halfway, your anxiety levels will automatically drop. You stop seeing them as a threat and start seeing them as an ally. This naturally has a very positive effect on your physical state and, crucially, on your blood pressure readings. Sometimes, despite all your best efforts, that very first blood pressure reading still comes back high. That is perfectly normal. Please don't despair or think that everything has gone wrong. The absolute worst thing you can do at that moment is start telling yourself off. Phrases like, "Oh dear, I've messed it up again," or "I knew it would happen," will only increase your stress levels. Instead, try to view that initial reading as a practice run, a preliminary figure. It was likely just your body reacting to walking into the surgery, or even just the fact that the procedure was starting. Now that the initial hurdle is over, you can try again in a much calmer state. Ask the doctor or the practice nurse if they could possibly leave you alone in the room for 5 to 7 minutes. This step is crucial. The mere presence of another person, especially someone in a white coat, is a trigger in itself. Once you are left alone, you can truly start to relax. Close the door, get comfortable, and reuse all those calming techniques we've discussed. Try the box breathing method, perhaps the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. You can also try some progressive muscle relaxation. Tightly clench your fists for 5 seconds, then completely release, noticing the difference. Do the same with your shoulders and legs. Focus on making your body as loose as possible. After those 5 to 7 minutes, ask the nurse to come back in and take the measurement again. In the vast majority of cases, the second, and especially the third reading, taken after a rest period, will be significantly lower than the first. That difference is clear evidence, both for you and your doctor, that you might have white coat syndrome. If the clinic offers it, the ideal solution is using an ambulatory blood pressure monitor, or ABPM. This is a small device you wear for 24 hours. It automatically checks your blood pressure at set intervals throughout the day and night, or while you're in your normal, everyday environment. ABPM results are considered the gold standard for diagnosing hypertension. They clearly distinguish true high blood pressure from white coat syndrome, giving the doctor the most objective picture of your cardiovascular health. Don't be afraid to ask your GP for a referral for this test, especially if they have any doubts about your standard readings. Let's move on to long-term strategies. Those little relaxation tricks in the doctor's waiting room are helpful, yes, but they only really tackle the symptom, not the root cause. To truly beat the fear, you need to put in some systematic work. And one of the most effective ways to do this is cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. Now, don't feel you need to rush out and see a therapist right away. Many CBT principles can be put into practice by yourself, starting today. The essence of this method is not to change the situation itself, like the actual doctor's visit, but to change your reaction to it. It targets the thoughts and beliefs that are actually causing all that worry. Step 1 is learning to spot those automatic negative thoughts. They just pop into your head, don't they? Get yourself a thought diary. Every time you think about visiting the doctor and feel that anxiety bubble up, jot down exactly what thought flashed through your mind. For example, the doctor is going to find something terrible. Step 2. We challenge and analyse that thought. Look at what you wrote down and question it, like a strict but fair detective. Ask yourself, what actual proof do I have that this thought is true? What evidence do I have to the contrary? For instance, have past visits been fine? Am I confusing a thought with a concrete fact? What's the most realistic outcome here, not just the scariest? And finally, if a friend told me this, What would I say to them? Step 3 is forming an alternative, much more realistic and balanced thought. Instead of, the doctor will find something terrible, try phrasing it like this: I'm going for a checkup to make sure everything is okay. If there is a problem, catching it early is the best way to deal with it. My anxiety is understandable, but it doesn't predict the future. If you do this exercise regularly, you'll gradually dismantle those old, irrational thought patterns and replace them with healthier ones. It's like a workout for your mind. You learn not to automatically trust every worried thought you have. Over time, your brain will become accustomed to reacting to the situation more calmly and rationally, and that underlying dread about visiting the doctor will start to fade away. Now, another rather powerful long-term strategy, straight out of the CBT toolkit, is something called gradual desensitization, or exposure therapy. Now, I know that sounds a bit daunting, doesn't it? But it's actually a very logical and effective approach. The core idea is that you gradually, step by step, ease your nervous system into the frightening situation until it stops causing a panic reaction. You don't jump in at the deep end. You move forward in small, manageable steps, going from simple to complex. First, you need to draw up a fear hierarchy, a list of situations related to medical settings, ranked from the least frightening to the absolute worst. For example, your list might look something like this. 1. Just thinking about going to the doctor. 2. Watching a medical drama on television. 3. Looking at the clinic's website and seeing photographs of the doctors. 4. Phoning the reception desk to check their opening times. 5. Walking past the GP surgery building. 6. Going inside the surgery and sitting in the waiting area for 5 minutes. 7. Booking an actual appointment. 8. Attending the appointment just to chat with the doctor, with no examination. 9. Attending the appointment and just having your blood pressure checked. 10. Having a simple blood test done. Now you start working your way through that list, beginning with the very first, easiest step. Your critical task is to remain in that anxiety-inducing situation until your level of anxiety has dropped by at least half. Say, for instance, you've gone into the clinic's waiting area. At first, the anxiety will spike up, but if you resist the urge to flee, if you stay put and use your breathing or grounding techniques, after a little while, your nervous system will adapt and the worry will start to fade away. Only when you feel completely comfortable and secure at one stage should you move to the next. This process might take weeks or even months. There is absolutely no need to rush it. The whole point is to gain positive experiences at every single stage. You tell yourself, I did that and nothing terrible happened. I am in control. This is how you slowly chip away at the old association of doctors equal danger and replace it with a new one. I can be in a medical setting and still remain perfectly calm. Alongside the psychological work, which is absolutely essential, a crucial part of your long-term strategy is regular, and most importantly, correct home blood pressure monitoring. This is your most reliable ally in tackling that dreaded white coat syndrome. Why is this so vital? Firstly, home readings give both you and your GP an objective, realistic picture of your actual blood pressure, away from that stressful clinical environment. This helps us avoid overdiagnosis and stops you being put on unnecessary medication. Secondly, the routine of regular measurements acts as a form of exposure therapy. You get used to the monitor, you get used to the procedure, and it stops being something frightening or extraordinary. It just becomes normal. Thirdly, seeing those normal numbers displayed day after day gives you powerful positive reinforcement. It completely demolishes that catastrophic belief, my pressure is always high, and replaces it with confidence in your own health. Now, for this data to be accurate, you must measure your pressure correctly. Please buy an automatic monitor that uses an upper arm cuff. The wrist versions are simply not accurate enough. Take your blood pressure twice a day, morning and evening, sticking strictly to the same time each day. In the morning, this should be after you wake up, but before breakfast and before taking any medications. In the evening, take it just before bed. Before you take the reading, sit down quietly for 5 minutes. Do not talk and do not watch television. Make sure you are seated correctly, as we've discussed. Your arm should be resting comfortably on the table at heart level. Take 2 or 3 measurements, waiting about 1 or 2 minutes between each reading, and then record the average result. Keep a meticulous diary where you log the date, time, systolic, diastolic pressure, and your pulse. This diary is your crucial document. It's what you take with you to your GP appointment, and believe me, it will speak louder than any words or anxieties you might have. Regular home monitoring gives you back that essential feeling of control, transforming you from a passive victim of circumstance into an active, confident manager of your own health. We mustn't underestimate the importance of managing general stress in our daily lives. White coat syndrome, after all, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's a clear sign of how your nervous system reacts to pressure. If you are constantly living under chronic tension, if your accelerator pedal, the sympathetic nervous system, is always pressed down, then it's hardly surprising that in an extreme situation, like visiting the doctor, you floor it completely. By simply reducing that overall stress load, you make your nervous system much more robust and flexible. So what exactly should we be doing? First and foremost, regular physical activity, gentle aerobic exercise, a good brisk walk, swimming, cycling, or even some light gardening is the best non-drug way to bring down blood pressure and ease anxiety. Exercise releases those wonderful endorphins, our happy hormones, which act as natural antidepressants and anti-anxiety remedies. Plus, moving around helps you burn off that excess adrenaline and cortisol. You really only need 30 to 40 minutes of moderate activity, 3 to 5 times a week. Secondly, look into mindfulness practices like meditation and gentle yoga. Regular meditation teaches your brain to stop getting tangled up in anxious thoughts, but rather just to observe them passing by. This helps train the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and emotional control. Yoga is especially good because it combines movement, breathing work, and meditation, making it a perfect all-in-one tool for tackling stress. Third, prioritize quality sleep. Lack of sleep is incredibly stressful for the body. It upsets your hormones and raises your blood pressure. Aim for 7 or 8 hours a night and try to keep consistent bedtime and wake-up times. And finally, don't forget balanced nutrition and staying properly hydrated. All these things, while they sound incredibly simple, build a strong foundation for your mental and emotional well-being. The firmer that foundation is, the easier it will be to weather those short, local stressful moments, like that necessary trip to the GP. Now finally, we come to the most important, and often the hardest step. If you realise this fear is too much, that it's escalating into a genuine phobia, iatrophobia, and it's stopping you from living a full life or getting essential medical care, please don't be afraid or embarrassed to reach out for professional help. A psychologist or psychotherapist is the person to see. This is absolutely not a sign of weakness, quite the opposite. It shows real strength, wisdom, and a responsible approach to your overall well-being. Modern psychotherapy offers a wealth of effective, evidence-based methods for managing phobias and anxiety disorders. Cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, which we've mentioned, is considered the gold standard here. Working with a specialist will help you identify and change those deeply ingrained, irrational beliefs much faster. You'll learn vital relaxation techniques and navigate the necessary stages of exposure therapy in a safe, supportive environment. Beyond CBT, other excellent approaches exist. For instance, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, teaches you not to battle the anxiety itself, but rather to acknowledge it and move forward with your life, aligning your actions with your values despite the fear. Hypnotherapy can also be useful, helping to address deep-seated, subconscious beliefs that may have been established years ago, perhaps even in childhood. Occasionally, in particularly severe cases where anxiety reaches the level of a panic disorder, you might need to consult a psychiatrist for temporary medication. There is absolutely no stigma attached to this. Anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants can act as a crucial support or crutch to help stabilize your state. This allows you to then work effectively with the psychotherapist on tackling the root cause of the problem. Please remember this: you do not have to battle this on your own. Seeking help is just as important a step in self-care as visiting your cardiologist or your dentist. Your mental and physical health are fundamentally linked, and both deserve attention. A specialist will help develop a personalised plan and support you throughout every single step on the road to overcoming your fear. Right then, let's wrap things up and summarise what we've learned. We've taken quite the deep dive into the world of white coat syndrome, and the most important takeaway is this: that spike in your blood pressure when you're sitting in the doctor's office. It is absolutely not your fault. It's not a sign of weakness, it's not just nerves, and you certainly aren't making it up. It's a real, powerful, automatic physical reaction driven by those ancient survival instincts, the ones that mistakenly see a doctor in a white coat as a threat. But here is the most crucial turn in the story. The most effective tool you have for managing this condition isn't found in the chemist's shop. It's right here, in your own head. That tool is simply understanding. Understanding how childhood anxieties shape adult reactions. Understanding how those stress hormones cause your heart to race and your blood vessels to constrict. Understanding how catastrophic thinking turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you grasp these mechanisms, you stop being a blind puppet controlled by them. You gain the power to intervene at any stage. You can prepare for the visit by removing unnecessary triggers. You can utilize focused breathing to switch your nervous system into a state of calm. You can ground yourself to escape the trap of panicked thoughts. And you can engage with your doctor as a true, equal partner. Step by step, you can retrain your brain, teaching it that a white coat is not a symbol of danger, but a symbol of help and care. Tackling white coat syndrome isn't just about getting an accurate reading on the monitor. It is invaluable stress management training that will serve you well in every area of your life. Thank you so much for watching this entire video through. I truly hope you found it useful. If you learned something new today, or found a piece of advice that you think will actually work for you, please do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next uploads. Now, a question for you. Which of the tips we discussed are you planning to try first, or perhaps you have your own long-tested method for staying calm before seeing the doctor? Please share your wisdom and your story in the comments section below. Let's help each other make those appointments just a little bit less daunting. Stay well and stay calm.